Good morning. So this morning, I'm delighted to have Ram Sundaram, the co-founder and COO at TerraPay. Ram, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Ram, you and I go back a long time.
Very long time.
I have the gray hair to prove it, right? I was recalling, 10 years ago or so when we spent some time together here in Dubai. A few of us in a room, in a bit of a war room, kind of looking at the payments landscape, international remittance, et cetera, with this kind of idea of, well, what wasn't yet TerraPay, but how we could do something, disruptive, how we could serve, a largely unserved market. And obviously TerraPay has come a long way. But perhaps you can share a little bit about the journey, let's say, that inspired you to focus on cross-border payments and, along with Ambar and then the team that you've built, create and grow TerraPay as an organization.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. It's, as you remember, we started off looking at mobile wallets at that time, and how mobile wallets back then were silos. And we looked at building something like Swift for mobile wallets. Mm-hmm. And that's where it started. We started looking at building something that could enable payments between mobile wallets, but then we needed to build settlements as well. So we started talking to banks. Then the banks started saying, why don't you allow us to send transactions to mobile wallets? So we did that, and then we added bank accounts as well to the mix. So it became an account payout network, a wallet payout network. And 10 years now, we are about 2 billion wallets and 7 billion bank accounts in 129 countries or something as of today. So it keeps growing.
Yeah. Wow. What a voyage though, right?
It has been hectic. Yes.
And what about the landscape, right? I mean, obviously in the last 10 years, 10 years ago, if you said I'm building a fintech, people would say, what's a fintech, right? Now fintech is everywhere, right? How do you think the landscape has changed with regards to international payments, cross-border remittance, the fintech space itself? What have you seen, let's say, in the last 10 years, good and bad, right?
Yeah, well, payments and cross-border payments especially were quite a niche thing those days, right, when we started off. And today they are getting more attention, or there's a lot more focus on how we can create efficient cross-border payment networks or systems. And with the growth of instant payment systems in countries, there is a lot of attention being paid to how we can make them interoperable. So you have the BIS doing things like Project Nexus. You have SWIFT looking at various initiatives there. The central bank governor of the Bank of Italy wrote an opinion piece in FT about how we should pay more attention to enabling interoperability between instant payment systems. So the landscape has changed. There's a lot more attention being paid to it now. As far as fintechs go, though, it hasn't, there are a lot more fintechs today focusing on payments and cross-border payments. But a lot of them I find are reliant on tech that's built by other firms. Mm-hmm. So you put together a core banking platform from somebody with a identity verification platform from somebody else and app built by a third party, mm-hmm. which doesn't really allow for much differentiation, right, or innovative solutions to be built, right? You're dependent on some other firm to be building something always. Regulators are looking at this now, especially in Europe, where they're looking at banking as a service providers and seeing if they should be regulating them, because there's a lot of dependency of the fintech industry on these technology companies, which are significant, but not regulated.
And not, let's say, and ultimately the customers, let's say, that are, leveraging those tech developments from those providers, what's their level of responsibility on, the quality of service or what's happening on the tech platform itself, because obviously they're serving, large numbers of consumers, but they're taking third-party technology is what you're saying. And accordingly, where does the responsibility lie, right? Is it on the banking service provider? Is it on the end company that's using the BaaS service in order to provide services to the consumer, et cetera.
Absolutely.
Right,
So if you look at any license application these days, there is a lot of attention paid to cybersecurity, what your controls are, what your processes are. But if you are reliant on a third-party platform, you are essentially not in control of that. It is that platform vendor that is in control of that. So then how does that platform vendor get held to a regulatory responsibility?
Right.
I think that's the attention that's getting a lot of focus now.
And what about the banks, right? I mean, the reality is, from my perspective, over the last 10 years, you've seen multiple attempts, let's say, to kind of accelerate in an area or in a niche, let's say, where the banks weren't serving, right? Have you seen that relationship with banks evolve? Because, in the early days, people were like, well, I'm going to compete with the bank. The bank has no idea. They're too big. They're too slow. They don't have the desire or the ability to serve that segment or that niche, right? Have you seen that change now into more of a partnership with the financial institutions versus a competition to the financial institution?
It is changing. There are certain banks that have woken up to the market, to the potential of this market, and they know they can't address it themselves. So they are working in partnership with fintechs like us. So we work with many banks to enable them to target the demographic that they will otherwise not be able to address. There are some banks that think of fintechs as competition, but I think that's changing significantly because it's a question of partnerships and how you can address those particular segments best.
What about competition? What are you seeing out there? I mean, I know there's a few in your space. Do you see that growing, or are you seeing that it's shifting, right, to weeding out the men from the boys? It's been 10 years, right? And obviously you've taken some significant strategic investors now, et cetera. Is it consolidating the market?
I know it's not to be a smart ass, but I don't think it is the space we really have competition, not just TerraPay. It's when you're in the business of interoperability, you work with everybody, right? That is interoperability. So those businesses that are in the same sort of space as us, we work with them and they work with us.
Right.
We deliver transactions for them and sometimes they deliver transactions for us. So it's interoperability. You focus, the market is huge. There's I don't think we're addressed even a small percentage of it yet. And there's a lot of place to grow and a lot of things to do, and no company can do it alone. So we have to work in partnership with other companies to do it.
I find the same, right? It's very similar to our business, right? Where some of your biggest competitors are also your customers.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Because, the need is so vast, right? And you can't be everywhere at all times delivering all things, right?
Absolutely.
So that's, it's nice to hear, let's say, that it's evolved, let's say, into that sort of mentality of, look, the pie is enormous, right? And we're only addressing still a very small segment of it. So that collaboration, I agree, is very key when it comes to, let's say, delivering anything at any scale, let's say,
Exactly,
in that segment. Let's switch a little bit to some advice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ram, you've done super interesting things in your career, right? So what about the guys out there that are still in that ideation phase? What kind of advice can you give to people that are looking at starting up a fintech, raising a little bit of money, a couple of valuable lessons you've learned along the way, let's say, that you can share with some people?
Find a problem that you really want to solve, and that is there for the solving. Don't get into something because there are many other people doing it, right? I think, and what I was saying earlier, if you are a fintech, if you want to be a fintech, there are at least two domains that you need to understand really well: the financial domain and the technology domain, right? You can't build a fintech if you are very strong on tech but have no exposure to the financial world, because it's an extremely complicated world. And the other way around, if you are in the financial world and you have no understanding of technology, you can't build a fintech. You need to bring these two things together. Again, if you are dependent on third parties for your tech, then are you really a fintech? You're sticking things together, right? And that's really not something that gives you any level of control over what you're offering to your customers. or any level of differentiation over what you're offering to your customers from your competition. So you need to own the tech. You need to understand the space that you're in, and you need to solve real problems. Just because everybody is a neobank nowadays, doesn't mean that you should also be a neobank, right? Mm-hmm. You need to find a real problem to solve.
Right.
And I think there are
plenty of problems that need solving.
There are so many problems that nobody's begun solving yet.
Yeah.
You have the SME sector, which is massive, which is completely not addressed today. You need to create solutions that specifically solve problems for those businesses. There are plenty of things to do.
Right.
Find the right thing and find the thing that you can do for the next 10, 15 years, because these things are not short-term projects. A startup is not a short-term project.
Yeah, that's for sure. Right? You need to be ready to go for the long haul.
Absolutely.
It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Right?
And be ready for the gray hairs.
Yeah. And what about Dubai? Why Dubai? Is it talent? Is it regulation? Is it ease of travel? You guys, I was lucky enough to visit your office not long ago and had a nice walk around with Ambar, and congratulations, it's very nice. But why?
Ease of travel.
Yeah.
We are in, like I said, 129 countries, mostly in Africa and Asia and Europe. And Dubai is very neatly in between these time zones. So we can, there is enough of an overlap from the Far East to Europe for us to make calls and be in meetings from here. And we are about 8 hours away from, I think, 2/3 of the population of the planet. So it's very convenient to be located here.
And talent?
You have to import the talent you need to
Really?
Dubai, right?
Yeah.
Mostly you do, because it's you hire people and they move to Dubai.
Yeah. Good. Look, Ram, it's been fantastic, right? I super appreciate you coming and spending some time. I know you're busy, but it's great, I think, to be able to take a step outside of the day-to-day.
Absolutely.
Right? And it almost forces you, let's say, to reflect on everything you've accomplished and take a step back and look at the market once again. So thanks for spending the time with us. Thanks for...
Always good to catch up with you. So
very good. Thanks, Ram.
Thanks.